Alrighty, so hi everyone and welcome. I'm Lorena Seidel, the creator of The Purposeful Child and your hostess for this expert interview series. And this is all about helping parents, helping moms especially, create a more positive relationship with their children and a more peaceful home environment for their families. So if you have been trying to parent in a more intentional, mindful, purposeful way, but you're still struggling to get your children to listen to you or to get them to cooperate without having to threaten or bribe or manipulate them, and if you are also trying to solve conflicts or helping them with their conflicts, this might be the missing link, because today we're going to be talking with Joanna Faber, and she is a communication expert and a parent expert. So I'm going to introduce Joanna, and she's just amazing, because if you know me and know my program, you have probably heard me recommending the books How to Listen So Kids Will Talk and How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Siblings Without Rivalry. And she is the daughter of Adele Faber, who co-authored those two best-selling books. So Joanna is an award-winning teacher, and she taught reading, math, and science at a New York City public school for over 10 years. And she also contributed to the book called How to Talk So Kids Can Learn at Home and in School. And she has this, huge experience with the classroom. And then she also contributed for an afterward title called The Next Generation. And that was the 30th anniversary edition for the book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen. And she lectures on communication skills all over the country, and she gives parenting workshops. And she is now working on her next book called How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. And this is what she's going to be talking to us about today. So her upcoming book and all this experience that she has, and this kind of a legacy that she's been living, and continuing the work of her mom. And Joanna lives in Putnam Valley in New York with her husband, 3 teenagers, dogs, cats, and an assortment of chickens. So this is just going to be wonderful, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this. So take notes. I for sure will be taking notes. And so hi, Joanna. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm excited to be talking to you.
Oh, this is great. So let's dive right in. So Tell me a little bit more about this wonderful work you've been doing, and how did it all start?
Well, as you just explained, it all started because I was raised by this woman who wrote a book on parenting, which puts me under a lot of pressure to have come out well, which is pretty awful. I wasn't going to go out and write a book. I was just going to keep my head down. But it didn't turn out that way. In truth, honestly, I had a pretty nice childhood. I really did grow up in this great family with my 2 brothers, where our parents accepted our feelings and respected our ideas and emotions. And when there was conflict, there was an attitude of problem solving rather than punishment. And I used all those skills in the years that I taught. And I was pretty convinced that when I had kids of my own, it was going to be easy, because, I grew up with this stuff. But I had no idea. The sheer relentlessness, the 24/7-ness of having kids, it's just overwhelming.
So true.
Every hour of every day, every hour of every night, there you are on call, on duty. It was not easy. Easy was the last thing it was. But let's suffice to say, I was very glad that I knew all these skills, and I had these skills to fall back on when everything was going haywire and falling apart. And I eventually ended up leading workshops based on my mom's book. And as the years went by, I realized that the majority of workshop parents that I had very young children and had all kinds of questions about how to get very little kids through the day. Because let's face it, there's nothing like a 2-year-old, for sheer energy and willpower and complete lack of analytical skills. And it's just mind-boggling how anyone survives it. Meanwhile, on the opposite coast, my childhood friend, Julie King, was leading workshops based on my mom's book in the San Francisco Bay Area. And she kept bugging me, Joanna, we have to write a book. We have to write a book. We have to use all our stories for all these parents who are struggling with their little kids. And I resisted as hard as I could. But she was very persistent, and finally I gave in. And now we have this book coming out in January that is a compilation of all the most common challenges that come up in households with young children. And we put together all the most creative and funny and heartwarming, we hope, stories of how parents applied these skills and to share them with other parents.
That's wonderful. What an incredible journey. And I'm so glad that you turned out so well and you did feel like you benefited from all of this, because I feel like, am I screwing up my kids because I'm so, into this parenting thing, and I feel like sometimes it might be too much pressure on me, too much pressure on them. So I'm glad to see
it's a lot of pressure. Listen, I never wanted anyone to know that I was the daughter of a parenting expert, because, here I am with my kid at a play group, my 1-year-old, maybe he bites somebody, and I don't want people saying like, oh, is that the mother? Is that mother, the one who was raised by a parenting expert and her little boy just bit somebody?
It is so interesting how we live with so much pressure. Like I feel the same way. I was like, from out of the playground, I'm always wondering, are people watching and judging and looking, and they're expecting me to be the perfect mom or my children to be perfect? And we just need to be realistic. Like, there is no perfect parent. We'll never get there. And our children are not perfect. And we don't even, that's not realistic to expect that they're just like any other 2 or 3 or 6 years. No, right? Nobody wants that.
You can't be perfect. But I try to be that person on the grocery line who smiles sympathetically at the mother whose child is melting down over the candy display, as opposed to, looking at her with an annoyed expression on my face.
Exactly.
We've all been there, right? We've all been.
So true. And it's so hard. And I tell parents, if it's not hard, maybe you're not doing it right, because it should be hard. Although it can be very easy if we have all the strategies and if we have a different mindset to parenting. But parenting, it's still going to always be the hardest thing we'll ever do. So
it's always going to be hard. It's just challenging. I mean, there will be those moments. And there will be those moments.
Exactly. We can find the easiness of having tools and strategies and feel like we can feel good and proud of ourselves after we handle certain situations, but it's still going to be hard.
And to remember that we always get another chance. If the older one shoves the younger one over, touching the Legos, and you do and say the wrong thing, that's not going to be the last time your older one's going to shove the younger one. You always have another chance to get it right. That's the beauty. I want to give your audience something that they can use. I would say, when parents come to a workshop, I would say their first priority is getting through the day, getting these kids dressed and out in the morning, and, don't poke your sister and don't take your shoes back off. I just put them on, and, eat your vegetables and all that kind of thing. And then the second priority, and no less important, is that they want their kids to turn out to be good people. They want to raise kind, respectful, considerate kids. So how do we address both these needs? And I think when people pick up how to talk so kids will listen, and listen so kids will talk, they tend to focus on the first part of the title because, it's a long title.
Mhm.
And when they read how to talk so kids will listen, I think the way most people interpret that is so kids will obey
Exactly.
or at least behave, or at least be slightly cooperative some of the time, because there's so many things we have to get kids to do. Now, if you think of the times when you're glad that you're not on a reality show, and nobody's filming you at home because you're just screaming at the kids, you've completely lost it. That's probably a time when you're feeling stressed, you're tired, maybe you're worried about something else entirely, your patience has worn thin. If the same problem had come up earlier in the day when you were feeling cheerful, you probably would have handled it more gracefully. The point is, there's a connection between how we feel and how we behave. We can't behave right if we don't feel right. And it's the same for kids. There's a connection. Kids can't act right if they don't feel right. So our first order of business is to figure out how to make kids feel right so they can behave right. And the way we start is by accepting feelings. It sounds really simple, but it can be a big perspective shift. We tend to automatically dismiss. We don't really have a problem with positive feelings. I should say, we have to work at accepting negative feelings.
I know it's so much easier to love our children when they're being good and they're doing the right thing.
Oh, you love your little brother. That's so nice. So,
it's so hard to
make them muffins and you're proud. That's lovely.
Yeah, but now loving them and accepting them when they're having a tantrum and throwing a fit and kicking you or saying, I hate you, that's the...
When they're sad, angry, frustrated. That's, that's when we want to dismiss the feeling, explain to the child why they shouldn't feel that way, tell him he's overreacting, scold him for being rude. We want to say, don't cry, it's just a little bump. Don't say you hate your brother, that's not nice. Your teacher isn't giving you too much math homework, you're just spending too much time complaining about it. But we stop to think, how would we feel if somebody dismissed our feelings? It doesn't seem so natural. What if somebody came to us and said, oh, your husband just passed away? Well, don't fret, you'll get another one.
Exactly.
The next time your child cries over some minuscule little injury, instead of saying, suck it up, kid, that's life, try, ooh, even a little bump can hurt, let me kiss it. When he says, I hate the baby, instead of saying, don't you dare, you can say, sounds like you're really annoyed with the baby. It's not easy to be a big brother. Sometimes you wish you could be the only one again. If a kid says, this homework is too hard, don't say, no, it's not, it's easy. Here, I'll help you. No kid ever took heart from the idea that what he's struggling to do is easy for other people. And even if he does figure it out, what does he figure it out? Something that's easy. It'll actually give him more courage if you accept the feeling.
Sure.
That can be frustrating. All those long division problems can drive you crazy. When he's sobbing, I lost my favorite Lego guy. Try to resist the urge to roll your eyes and say, oh, please, you have a million of those pesky little vacuum hazards. Instead, you can say to him, oh, so that one was special to you. The one with the little helmet and the silver sword. You like that one. That's what's going to help them recover more quickly. It's almost counterintuitive because we feel like accepting a negative feeling will make it worse. And when we try it, take the plunge and try it, we find that accepting the negative feeling helps kids understand and let go of it.
It's so true. Parents ask me this all the time, but am I just gonna, if I say something when they fall, if I make a thing out of it, then they're gonna really melt down. And I'm like, no, they will get through it more quickly. You accept, and you're still respectful and gentle, and you just kind of, sometimes I say, treat your children like they're a guest or a friend, a coworker. If you see them tripping and falling, we never say, oh, you were fine, just, brush it off, you're going to be okay. So this is so great. Like, those are such great examples.
It's a great way to think about it. How would you talk to a friend?
Yeah. How would you talk to another person? Because
a friend who also happens to wake you up in the middle of the night, and a friend who you have to get to brush her teeth,
exactly.
a friend.
But it's still, yeah.
Spirit, a friend.
Exactly.
I have got this little dialogue from my mom's house to show how two conversations might go with denying feelings and accepting feelings. And I'm not going to say who the little girl is, but suffice to say, I was the only daughter in my family. So here's the child. I hate grandma. That is not a nice thing to say. I don't care. I hate her anyway. How can you talk that way? Grandma loves you. Well, I don't love her. That's enough out of you, young lady. I think you better go to your room. End scene. On another occasion, I hate grandma. Boy, you sound angry. I am. Something grandma does really upsets you. Every time she comes, all she does is play with a baby. Hello, sweetheart, who's my little precious boo-boo? Peekaboo, I see you. And then she gives the baby a present. And she says to me, you're too big for baby toys. And then she gives me $1 for my bank. So you don't want the money? No! You'd rather have a present like the baby? Yeah! Honey, do you wish sometimes it could go back to the way it used to be when you were the only one? Yeah. I'm so glad you told me, because now I know. Can we tell Grandma I like presents too, so she knows? I think we can do that. So,
right.
Here's a kid making a very inflammatory statement. I hate grandma. It's hard to accept.
Exactly.
But when you shut her down, what happens? She ends up still feeling angry at grandma. Now she's angry at her mother too, and she probably feels bad about herself.
Exactly.
But if you can bring yourself to accept that feeling, and you don't have to agree with the feeling. You don't have to say, oh, I hate grandma too. She's a horrible old woman. You can just say, sounds like you're really angry at grandma. Something she did annoyed you. If you can bring yourself to do that, you make a connection, and then you hear more, and then you can work towards a solution, or just a relief. It's such a relief to know there's someone out there who hears you and understands you.
I know, I feel like this is parenting from a place of compassion and acceptance. I usually say connect before correct. Like it's always, it's like we have to, parent for connection, because that's what's gonna, really help us solve the core problems. Because otherwise we're just trying to put the problem away or, treat the symptom that we see. But it's so important that we get to the bottom of it and we connect with them. So this is a great example of how to connect. I love that.
Yeah, but and some things are just more difficult to connect with than others. When someone's saying, I hate grandma, and grandma is your mother, and here she is coming and giving presents to the kids, that's a difficult challenge.
Yeah. So
if you can't do it, forgive yourself and go ahead and do it the next time.
Exactly.
It's easier to do if the kid says, I don't like spaghetti. Like, oh, you don't like spaghetti anymore? How about we get twists? Although that can even be hard too. If you've labored over a meal and you put it in front of a kid, the kid says, I don't like spaghetti. That can feel pretty unacceptable. Exactly. It's hard to come up with, so it sounds like even though you liked spaghetti last week, now you're not in the mood for it. Which doesn't mean you have to run and cook something else.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just accept the feeling and you'll avoid a big blowout. Yes, you do like spaghetti. Don't lie to me. You finish your plate. You can say, oh, sounds like you're maybe next time we go to the store, let's try a different shape of pasta.
Exactly.
Let's write it down on a list. You can just accept the feeling. So People sometimes misperceive this as being a permissive approach. But what my mom would say is all feelings can be accepted. Some actions must be limited. So you don't say, oh, you hate the baby. That's fine. Go, carry on slapping the baby.
Yeah.
So you accept the feeling, and actions are limited.
So that was the first one, accepting the
feelings.
And I like how you said it at first, because I usually talk about how all of us, including children, we don't do better until we feel better. And I feel like that's the whole premises of, accepting the feelings, is helping them get to this place where they feel better so they can actually do better. Because I feel like our gut reaction sometimes is to make them pay and suffer, and we want to punish them, we want to teach them a lesson, we want them to somehow pay for what they have done, but that is going to get us even further away from coming up with a positive solution. So
there's no pot of gold at the end of that rainbow.
No.
The more you make them feel, the harder it is. The more we make them feel like a bad person, the harder it is for them to act like a
good person. That's so good. So I thought that this was great. Like, this is such a good example that exemplifies that. Like, we need to make them feel better before they can do better.
It's very succinct. I might steal it.
Oh, take it.
The other point is that giving them a language for their feelings and teaching them that their feelings are important lays the groundwork for them to respect other people's feelings. So when we give them language like frustrating, disappointing, irritating, sad, it opens up a whole new world for them. They can start to develop empathy and think about other people feeling those emotions. And I have a story from my classroom long ago. I hope I can remember it right. When I taught at PS 161 in West Harlem, I had a bunch of kids who were, with hair trigger tempers. And I was supposed to be teaching them reading and math and getting them up to speed in the resource room. But everybody who's ever worked with kids knows that if kids are angry and upset, they can't learn. So a good deal of classroom time was spent dealing with feelings, and giving them words for their feelings. So instead of just striking out, I would say, oh, that made you angry. You didn't like it when he grabbed your sweatshirt hood. Let's tell him, don't tug my hood. I spent a lot of time reminding them that roughhousing has to stop if someone's hurt or upset. I would say, look in the person's face. Is he crying? Does he look angry? Is he still having a good time? Everybody has to be having a good time. So I had this one kid named Luis. He was a 5th grader, very small, wiry kid with a real hair trigger temper, very ferocious kid. And one afternoon I was on recess duty and I saw a whole cluster of kids around the chain link fence. And I moved closer and I saw that a little kid, I think it was a 3rd grader, had kicked the bottom of the fence and it was loose. So his shoe got stuck under the chain link. And all these older kids were standing around him laughing as he desperately tried to tug his foot out. And then some of the kids ran in and pushed the fence down on his foot to prolong the entertainment. So I started, towards the fence, and I saw Luis dart in front of me, and he really snarled at those kids and he backed them off and he let the little kid free. And I just said to him, Luis, what made you do that? And he said, Miss Faber, I looked at his face like you told us, and he was definitely not having a good time.
No.
And, I was filled with pride for him. And I can't take credit for this lovely young man's actions completely, but I couldn't help but feel that I had provided the language in our classroom to help him think in an empathic way. Look at his face. How is he feeling?
That's a great,
that's what we want. We want a kid who will go out in the world and not just walk on by, but stand up to a mob and do the right thing. What more could you ask, right? But it's not just about accepting feelings. we also have to get through the day. We have to get kids to do a lot of things. And, we tend to snap out orders and threats sometimes, if you don't do this, you won't get that. And the problem is kids respond to threats and orders much the same way as adults do. They resist them with all their might. So when we say to a kid, it's time to clean up, and the kid responds, I don't want to clean up, the temptation is to tell him, don't be lazy. You made the mess. You clean it up. What do you think I am, your servant? Now, if we stop and think for a minute about how we would feel in a similar circumstance, I don't know, say you have a sink full of dirty pots and pans and you say, ugh, I don't want to clean up this big mess. And your partner turns to you and says, you ate, didn't you? Don't be lazy. Get to it. Would that inspire you to start scrubbing a pan? Or would that maybe make you think of doing something else with the pan, right?
Exactly.
It's frankly enraging. So what do we do with this kid who doesn't want to clean up? I would say, go to the first skill first. First, accept feelings. Boy, cleanup isn't the fun part. It's a pain in the neck. You can indulge in a little fantasy. Boy, I wish we had a robot to put this stuff away for us. Or wouldn't it be nice if the blocks could jump onto the shelves by themselves? Kids love playfulness. So there's a whole bunch of ways to use playfulness to help kids get to do what they need to do. Because the day gets long and grim. They get told what to do all day. So what can you do? You can make it into a game. Let's see if we can toss the blocks in the box from this line. You can play pretend. Let's pretend we're squirrels gathering food for the winter.
I love that. Yeah.
The red blocks are berries and the blue blocks are acorns. You can say, let's have a race. I'll bet you can't get all the blocks away before I finish cutting up these onions for dinner. Like, I'm going to cut, you put, ready, set, go. And happily, all the kids are working away, cleaning up blocks.
That's great.
If you're not always in the mood.
Ways to connect with children. You get to their level, or you find what interests them. I love the idea of, all those little things that can help us get through them. Sometimes parents think that the easiest way to get from A to B is a straight line, and you have to enforce that and get it done and do it in a forceful way. But sometimes it's a zigzag or it's a longer route, but you get there faster.
There is no better way of saying it. We try to go for the straight line. You want
it's like
to put the block in the bag, tell a kid, put those blocks in the bag.
But
seems so direct. It seems like such a nice straight line.
I know. And it takes so long, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all.
It was miserable. So this is truly a more circuitous route, but a lot of people think, I don't have time for this, I don't have patience for this, but when they try it, they find, oh, this was so much easier. It turns out I do have time. Nothing about having kids is convenient. Let's face it. We didn't have kids, so our lives would be quicker and
easier.
easier and more convenient and more straightforward. When we have kids, we commit to a circuitous route. So that's a few. Let me give you a few more. Again, it seems natural for us to tell kids what to do, and often to throw in a little threat, which we like to call a natural consequence. So we say, if you throw sand one more time, I'm taking you straight home.
Yeah.
And the problem with threats is the spirited child does not hear that whole sentence. What she hears is, throw sand one more time. A threat can really become a challenge. So if you can instead acknowledge feelings and convert the threat to a choice, you may be home free. So you can say something like, boy, sand is really tempting to throw. We can play on the grass or we can play on the swings. You decide.
Exactly.
now you're giving them a little task. You're teaching them to think instead of just obey. Sand is tempting to throw. It makes a nice little rain down. So again, you're accepting the feeling, but you're limiting the action. And hey, you may have to go home. If your child keeps insisting on throwing sand, you may have to say, you know what, we can't stay in the park right now. I'm too worried about sand getting in the kids' eyes. Let's go home and find something else to play. Does it say this in my mom's book? It may. It says, take action without insult. Picking up a kid and saying, we have to go home. I can't let other kids get sand in their eyes. It's just simply taking action without insulting the child.
Exactly.
Bad little kid. This is something that children start to become part of their mentality when they're raised this way. So when you see your child start to use this kind of language with their friends, it's a real moment. And, my son, who grew up being given choices, when he was 3 years old, once we were visiting a friend, and I was sitting inside watching the kids out the window, having a nice little coffee with my friend and relaxing. And I saw the kids outside, and the voices were starting to go up. They were playing with little plastic tigers and lions and having a little tiger-lion fight with them. And they were pressing down on each other's hands. And I could see their faces turning red. And, one of them said, let go, you're hurting my hand. And the other one said, well, you're hurting my hand. I have to hurt your hand because you're holding my hand down. But you're holding my hand down. And I sort of gave a little sigh because I knew I have to get up now and break up the fight. And just as I'm about to leave, luckily I was reluctant, so I gave them a little extra time. I heard my son say, Christopher, here are our choices. We can keep on playing with the animals and not hold each other's hands down, or we can play with something else. Which do you choose? And Christopher said, let's play with something else. And they both dropped the little tigers in the dirt and went off to play with something else. And I thought, wow,
there you go.
It'd be nice if countries could do that.
This is such a cute story because I feel like the more we use those strategies and those tools, we're also modeling and teaching those tools and strategies so our children can use in their relationships and with their conflicts. So I see this all the time. I see the girls using something and my husband's like, oh my gosh, they sound just like you. Like someone say like, I'm sorry. And then my oldest says, well, sorry is a good start. What else can you do to make her feel better? And then I was like, look at that. Like,
look at that.
Like
you're listening.
So it's so nice. I love when they actually use our tools and strategies and in their own relationships.
And they keep us honest because when we order them around, we hear them ordering around their siblings.
Oh, yeah, sometimes.
And we say, ooh, that doesn't sound nice, right?
Oh, I totally know. When I'm doing too much of the telling, directing, correcting, managing, I can start to see they start doing it to each other. And I'm like, oh, I got to back off a bit. Like,
they are paying attention. They are paying attention, and they don't do as we say. They do as we do, right? One more engaging cooperation skill. And that is engage in cooperation by putting the child in charge. Because often parents will say to me, well, he just wants to be in charge. He wants to manipulate the situation, and I have to control him. And my response will be, well, if he wants to be in charge, let's put him in charge and see how that goes. So instead of fighting against all your child's energy, use that energy. Mm-hmm. So one conflict that I constantly had with my oldest son was that he didn't like to put a coat on when it was cold out. And, it could literally be 20 degrees outside and he would be out there in a t-shirt unless I am shivering with all the other parents looking at me like I should be sent to jail, unless I had an epic battle with him. So what we did was I got one of these big thermometers, outdoor thermometers, and we talked about, well, what's bathing suit weather when it's 80 degrees or 90 degrees? That's really hot. You like to go in the pool. So we made a little picture of a kid in a bathing suit. And then we said, what about 0 degrees? That's really cold, snow. And we made a little picture of a coat and gloves and a hat. And then we filled in the pictures in between. And after that, every morning before it was time to go to school, I would say to Dan, can you check the thermometer and let us know what to wear? And he would run outside and look, and he would come in and say, everybody has to wear a coat today. So now he's in charge of the whole system. I don't have to tell him, he can tell me. And it's, not only have we solved the conflict, but, we put him in charge of a part of his life. He's on the road to independence, which is, after all, what they really want. I mean, that's what their drive is, right? And it takes some background work. You're not always, you're not always in the position to reel back time and say, "Ooh, I wish I made the chart." Sometimes you're just stuck with jamming a coat on a kid, but you can always, what should I do next time? Let me just talk about punishment before we leave. Because when kids do something really wrong, I think, we have the urge to punish them because we want to teach them a lesson. And I think kids do learn a lesson from punishment, but it's not necessarily the lesson we want to teach. The lesson I think they learn is that when there's a conflict, we resolve a conflict by thinking about how to hurt the other person or make the other person feel bad. And you'll see that if you have more than one kid, you see that among the siblings, that if you punish a child, you'll see them do something to their sibling. Another thing that punishment teaches is it teaches them to focus on themselves. Punishment can actually make a child more selfish, because when you punish him, he's thinking, he's thinking about what TV shows he's going to miss, or how he doesn't like being in timeout. He's not thinking about the problem. He's not thinking about the pain he caused someone else or how to fix a problem. So punishing actually can make it harder for a kid to take responsibility for his actions. What we want a kid who thinks about how to fix a problem, who thinks about how to make amends, a kid who's solution oriented. So the question is, how do we get there? And there's a technique called problem solving, which is a perspective shift. Instead of fighting your child, you invite your child to be a partner in solving a problem. And so now you're on the same side. When Dan, my oldest, was 2.5, during the winter, I used to let him ride his trike around inside the house, because we had a gravel and clay and mud driveway, and it was miserable outside. The problem was wherever I put the baby down, who was trying to learn to crawl, that's where he wanted to ride his bike. So he would, come really near the baby and really near the baby. And I would say, Dan, not so near the baby. Dan, you're going to hurt his little fingers. Dan, I'm going to have to take the bike away if you keep doing that. And he didn't listen, and he didn't listen, and he didn't listen. And I didn't want to take the bike away. I mean, I didn't want to have a miserable day with an angry kid. He was happy riding his bike. So I thought, well, he's a little young for problem solving, but I've got nothing to lose here. So I said, Dan, I can see you're having a really good time riding your bike. And that's accepting the feeling, for starting by accepting the feelings. And I said, and Sammy is having a good time watching you ride your bike. And he gave a big grin. And then I said, my problem is I'm worried about Sammy's little fingers. I'm worried about the bike tires coming so close to Sammy's little fingers. We need an idea. And Dan looked at me and he said, Nanny ride over here. And he indicated the other side of the room. And he rode off to the other side of the room, having solved the problem.
That's it.
And it was, I felt like God had just invented light. It was an amazing thing. When I told my son what to do, and I told him what to do, and I told him what to do, he would stubbornly refuse to listen. But as soon as I told him we need an idea, all of a sudden his gears, went to work.
Turning.
He solved the problem. There's a story that you told on your website that I thought really just epitomized this whole problem-solving approach and the humanity of it, which was your bunny story.
Oh, yes.
You walk into the room and you see your 4-year-old shaking Bonnie by its back legs. And I think you had said, I said,
oh, I did all the wrong things.
all the wrong things.
In 20 seconds.
What did you say? I wrote,
like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? How can you be so mean? Do you need to give this money to another family with nicer little girls? I was like, oh my gosh. And
I can't even look at you. Go to your room, right?
I was like, I did the shame, the blaming, the
blame. And I thought, what else could you do? Here, you're a feeling, empathic person, and you were seeing this helpless creature be tormented. Like, what else could a human being do? How else could you possibly have reacted? It's just so, that's real. And then, you thought, then you thought about it and you thought, boy, I'm not going to end up with a gentle, animal-loving kid by, shaming her and making her feel bad about herself. So you came back in the room and you told her a story about how you were mean to a kitten when you were little.
Mm-hmm.
And I could just imagine her looking at you with wide eyes, like, my mommy, who's like this good person, and she made a mistake. I could be a good person. And then I think you made a list of things you could do with the bunny, like how you could play with it and take care of it in a gentle way. And
it was so nice to see. I could see the weight lifting off her shoulder. The second that I was like, okay, I'm going to look at her in the eyes. I'm going to connect. I'm going to touch her on the shoulder. And then I said, well, I did something mean to some kittens once. And then she sparkled and she's like, oh, you did. I'm not mean. Like
I'm not a bad person.
I'm not a bad person. Like we could relate. And that second we connected. And then I was able to, let's brainstorm. Let's talk about some things that we can do. And then she came up with a list. We came up together. And that was so good.
I think to me, that like epitomizes great parenting, that you everything falls apart and then you come back and you turn it around. And it's like it's so profound. You can do something awful. You can shake a bunny, you can break a window, you can slap a sibling, and then you can come back and you can fix the mistake. You can figure out what to do in the future. You can make it better. Instead of thinking of yourself as a bad person or a failure, now she thinks of herself as a problem solver. It's like, what more could you possibly want?
Sure.
And the idea, very important, is that you forgive yourself. Don't beat yourself up. You're human. You're going to make a million mistakes, and you should be as forgiving of yourself as you are with your children. You should give yourself as many chances as you give your children. Before I go, I have to quote my mother's mentor, Dr. Ganat. And he said, don't despair. He said, please don't despair that you're not the perfect parent. Nobody is. Be as kind and patient with yourself as you strive to be with your children. Give yourself just as much forgiveness and just as many chances as we give our children. And he said, you don't have to be orthodox. You can be reform. And we aim for 70%. Some days 50% is all we can manage. And even 10% can make a real difference in a relationship. So I thought that was a really good message to go home with. It
is wonderful. I love Chaim Ganat. One of my favorite quotes is from him too, and it is from probably one of your mom's books. This is so great. Thank you so much. I'm sure everybody who's watching is feeling good, because I feel like that's what we want. We want to feel good. We're not going to do better if we don't do better.
And if you're interested in the book,
yes,
on Amazon, it's on pre-sale on Amazon.
Good.
Little Kids Will Listen. It's got
say that again.
Stories in it. How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. It's got hundreds of stories. It's got a chapter on children who are on the autism spectrum and have sensory issues. It's got, lots of short chapters, lots of short topics. You can flip around in it. Nobody will reproach you for not reading it in order. It's got pictures and cartoons.
That's great.
Check it out.
So thank you.
I'm glad
for watching, and thank you so much for participating. This is such an honor to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Even as I'm in my own living room, I'm here.
I know, it's good. Great. Thank you and goodbye for now.
Bye for now.
Bye. Bye.